So something that I've noticed about this movie, particularly as we've been kind of talking about it and watching it, what I've noticed about this movie is that it establishes like a paradox.
Okay.
Like the kind of paradox like the Super Mario 64 hallway where it goes infinite.
Yeah,
or
it's
the
just
picture.
forever.
It's the picture of the artist drawing a picture of the artist drawing a picture of the, it's like that. It's because this movie establishes Stab, the movie in the movie. And Stab it follows, presumptively, all of the movies.
The events of the first film.
And we will talk about, obviously all of these movies, but eventually the movie takes place around the making of the movies and then the watching of the movies.
Right.
This movie opens with watching the movie, which means that eventually within the movie, they make the movie within the movie, within the movie. And then in that version, they also make the movie with, and like it is the picture in the picture in the picture. Because in every Stab, they have to reference the fact now that there are murders in and around the movie.
Right.
They have to acknowledge the fact that there are movies. So it goes infinitely.
It is like the Scream franchise, and it starts with this one, is one of the most meta things ever, which is kind of the point. Like, what Scream number? Because we're through 6. We're gonna get 7 like next year sometime. But like, at what point do we get a Scream where us talking about them on this podcast is then featured in the movie?
So here's the problem. The human lives are only measured in mortality, average life expectancies. And so is the sun. And, eventually it will explode and destroy all life in the solar system. And those things will happen before enough people have listened to us on this podcast to reference it in Hollywood.
Well, we can only hope.
No, what I hope for is that eventually this podcast gets so big that we have to we record right now in our home. Eventually we might get a studio, and then eventually we outpace the studio because we're the biggest podcast in the world, bigger than, Oprah or whatever. And we get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually we have to do the podcast from a whole island.
Wow.
And we call it Podcast Island. And Scooby-Doo shows up and he does podcast stuff with us because it's like the live action movie where they go, what is it, Horror Island?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Scooby-Doo on Podcast Island.
Scooby-Doo on Podcast Island, wherein he says, "Welcome rack." And welcome back to the Third Channel podcast,
where we delve into the horror franchises you love from the perspectives of a lifelong horror fan
and a newbie to the genre. I'm PJ.
And I'm Derek.
And today the only thing we are here to talk about, like every week, is horror. Now, I put a lot of emphasis on the word newbie in that.
You did?
Yeah, because that's the intro, and it's good. And I like it. And I put newbie really in italics. And the point of that is that I want to do a little bit of housekeeping so that we can start hawking ourselves, pitching.
On the right foot?
Right, on the right foot. So when I first pitched this show to you, I struggled to come up with a title to pitch it because I thought that if I said, hey, we should do this show about this stuff, and this is the title, it would sound catchy and you would like it, and then it would be an easier, let's work on that.
Yeah,
and
an easy sell.
But unfortunately, I couldn't. I was stuck on the word newbie because it's like that's the thesis of the show. That's the thing it's about. I'm new to this. I don't know what we're really talking about. I'm experiencing it as we go. Mm-hmm. And so I was stuck on the word newbie, but nothing relative to the show's content rhymes with newbie. So for a working title, I came up with newbie and schmoobie, a nonsense word. Because I couldn't think of a real word.
But it's, it's one of those things that you hear in movies, you do that rhyming scheme with the sh on the, the second word.
It's very Seussian.
Yeah.
You know, I say schmoobie. So that's how I pitch it to you, newbie and schmoobie.
But not that, something better.
Yeah. And then eventually, two things have happened. Eventually, we have also watched the Evil Dead movies. Mm-hmm. And we've realized that newbie kind of rhymes with groovy. Because
that's true.
Ash says that. Mm-hmm. And then,
it's a catchphrase.
You know, Evil Dead is a movie, and movie rhymes with groovy. So that kind of sounds like newbie and schmoobie, which I'm still stuck on at this point. And then we watched a lot of shows with my partner and my, at the time, roommate. Mm-hmm. And
we've mentioned him before.
Yeah. And the two of them really enjoy recreational use of a thing that you might put into, let's call it a doobie, you know. And they also both like, this is the hard one. This is the one that's a little difficult to explain in a podcast, but they both enjoy things that go in sweaters that horror movies are famous for having taken out of those sweaters.
That's true.
If that makes sense.
Especially those Friday the 13th movies.
Yes, especially. They love them. But specifically, my partner and my roommate at the time loved that part of those horror movies. It's their favorite part.
It's true.
So, and the last and most important thing, and this is why I'm going through all of this, this is the housekeeping element of this, is that a lot of the movies that we were watching at the time, because they were kind of far-reaching, were on Tubi.
Well, yeah, because that's the interesting thing there is, like every October comes around and we're trying to watch 31 horror movies over the course of the month. And so I typically put out like hey, everybody online, here's my recommendations of things that are currently streaming. So that means I go through every streaming service that I use.
Sure.
And I compile a list and I put it out there. And what I have found over the last like 10 years is that Tubi, the free service of Tubi, has an incredible amount of horror films on there.
Sell this like a pitch, really smooth it up.
And you have to dig through a lot of crap.
Yeah.
But there's some gold nuggets out there on Tubi.
If the listener, if you are familiar with Best of the Worst, the YouTube series about crappy movies from Red Letter Media, if you're familiar with that, we're fans of that here on this show. It kind of inspired a lot of this early like B-movie watching as well, along with the infrastructure horror movies. It's the schlocky crap. We found on Tubi Suburban Sasquatch,
yes,
which is a movie that they love and it's terrible. It's awful, but it was a lot of fun to watch. Now the reason we created this podcast is a love of these movies and a friendship and wanting to kind of meld those two things together on mic and bring you guys into it. But the secret reason is we really want a sponsorship from Tubi.
Absolutely.
We love them. We love Tubi.
I want to support them, and I hope and wish that they would support us.
Yeah, we don't need money, by the way, Tubi, if you're listening, if somebody gets this to Tubi.
Yeah, can we just get like Tubi with no ads?
Tubi with no ads? I wouldn't mind a Tubi shirt.
Oh, that'd be great.
I'd like a Tubi shirt. Yeah.
And I'd purple and yellow.
But I'd like to put in the description of this show, more than anything,
sponsored
by Raid Shadow Legends, but then also Tubi. I want that first. So the title of the show for Tubi, as far as it's concerned, to combine all of those rhyming words that I went over earlier, is Newbie and Schmoobies, Grooby Moobies with Doobies and Boobies on Tubi. And that's our title.
That's the podcast.
Yeah. Now we're going to call it Third Channel because that's easier to say. But we'll all, the real fans, the people hopefully that'll eventually like go on and make a fan club.
Yeah.
That would be cool if we had a fan club. And the fan clubs will call themselves the Schmoobies. Yeah.
That's good.
Or the Tubies. I don't know. But that's one bit of housekeeping. I know you had housekeeping as well.
Yes. My housekeeping was in our first episode, our first official episode talking about Scream, is toward the end of the episode I realized I had made an error in the date of a terrible thing that happened. And basically a couple things got kind of mixed in my head as to why.
Sure.
But I had said that some of the themes that were going around in the first Scream movie were probably caused or came about because of the Columbine high school shooting that happened.
Right.
I was mistaken on the dates of those things. So Scream comes out in 1996, but the Columbine shooting did not happen until 1999. So now the reason it got mixed in my head is that the Columbine shootings did affect Scream 3's production. Because Scream 3 comes out in 2000. So they are in production when
during
that happens.
shooting, yeah.
And so it makes them, and we'll go over this again in our coverage of Scream 3, but it forced them to have to cut back on a lot of the violence that happens in Scream 3, which is why Scream 3 gets a little bit more flack from fans. But I just wanted to make sure that, I fixed that because that was a mistake on my part.
Sure.
And,
And what's so funny about that is that what ends up happening to Scream 3 is like almost the theme of Scream 2.
It's this bizarre. That was rewatching Scream 2 because I hadn't seen it in a couple years. That was my realization. I was like, wow, it hadn't happened yet. Like the big school shooting that kind of, unfortunately
cemented
kicked off
that,
this horrible, thing that this country now has is covered almost exclusively in Scream 2. That is one of the huge themes in that film, in this film that we're talking about today. And it hadn't happened yet. Like that hadn't happened yet.
Like Matt Groening, Wes Craven can predict the future, but only the spooky future.
You could say what happened in that theater is a direct result of the movie itself.
That is so moral majority. You can't blame real-life violence on entertainment.
What? Wait a second. Yes, you can. Don't you even watch the news? Yeah, hello. The murderer was wearing a ghost mask, okay? Just like in the movie, it's directly responsible.
No, it's not. Movies are not responsible for our actions.
It's a classic case of life imitating art, imitating life.
This is not a hypothetical. It's not about art. I had biology with that girl. This is reality.
Thank you. I agree with you. Let me tell you about reality, Mickey. I lived through this, okay? Life is life. It doesn't imitate anything.
Come on, Randy. With all due respect, the killer obviously patterned himself after 2 serial killers who have been immortalized on film.
Thank you. Right.
Are you suggesting that someone's trying to make a real-life sequel?
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck.
Which is, that line is such a genius joke in and of itself. But if, we couldn't, if you hadn't already guessed or if we haven't already said, the movie we're talking about today is Scream 2.
Scream Dose.
Scream 2, it came out, it was released in December of 1997. They rushed this thing into production.
Yeah.
Like, it was greenlit before, after the first month of Scream being in theaters. Still directed by Wes Craven. Still written by Kevin Williamson. The budget for this one, do you want to take a stab at this?
That's so good. That's such a good joke. Fuck you. What was the budget of the first one?
So the budget of the first one was 14 to 15 million.
Okay, I like this because I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to guess twice as much, 30 million.
Not quite.
Okay.
So 24 million for Scream 2.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then what do you think the gross was? I'll give you the gross of the box office of Scream 1996, 173 million. 173 million is the box office.
I'm gonna take the same odds. I'm gonna go double. I'm gonna say closer to 300 million.
You would think, because a lot of horror sequels do double until they don't.
Yeah.
Which is why we have so many Friday the 13th movies. But 172 million, so technically just a hair less.
That's weird.
Than the first movie.
That's weird.
And I don't know why that is exactly. Something that we didn't cover with the first Scream movie that, even with all of our jokes and things like that, we never touched on this, and I think it's interesting, is Scream was originally conceived under the title Scary Movie. That is what Kevin Williamson, he wrote this script for basically the movie that we got with Scream. It is a slasher that is also kind of a send-up or a satire of the slasher genre. But he just went with the most generic title ever of Scary Movie. And once they got it in, and it finally got bought because it went around all the different studios out there, and it finally got bought by Miramax, and they had changed the title eventually to Scream because it was like, well, we don't want to call it Scary Movie, but let's still stick with a very generic, just
super simple
word.
Yeah.
Which is then funny that in these movies, like you were saying before, the movie within the movie is called Stab.
Right.
So it's another just kind of it's an S word that is just generic enough that it's you could call a horror movie.
Yeah, it's a one-word thing. Well, it's funny because you usually do that, right? It's another Friday movie, another Nightmare movie, another Hellraiser movie. They all have subtitles that are super long. No one knows them. It's just another, except for Dream Warrior because of that fucking song. But the point is that it fits. But now you're not shorthanding anything. It's the name of the film and a fucking number, and that's it.
Which wasn't always the case for this sequel. So when Kevin Williamson turned in the script for, at the time, Scary Movie, he actually turned it in with 2 5-page treatments for sequels. So he already had simple ideas of what the sequel Scream 2 or Scary Movie 2 and 3 would be, because he was kind of trying to sell it as like, oh, not only do I have a full script for you, I'm selling you a franchise.
Yeah.
From the jump. And he's gone on to, after Scream's success, then he did I Know What You Did Last Summer. He wrote that. He was also working on Dawson's Creek. So a lot of those teen, a
lot of episodic stuff too.
Yes.
A lot of stuff with it, because that's a flowing theme in at least the first 3.
Yeah.
Is that everything matters, which is nice, because sometimes, and it happens with 4, and then much more obviously with 5 and 6 in this franchise. But once it changes hands, the minutia doesn't seem to matter as much. It doesn't, like a good example for this movie is it doesn't matter that, Billy Loomis's mother was nebulously involved.
Right.
But in these first 3, it's like every little detail like that is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the first 3 are more tight-knit in that. But so I think it's interesting that, like, he has this idea, he pitches it with the idea of being a franchise, we're going to give you a sequel, and they kicked around the titles for Scream 2 before they landed on Scream 2, which seems like a no-brainer, but Scream Again was an option. I think they also went, the idea they were kicking around was, like, Keep Screaming or Scream Louder, and then even more meta, Scream: the sequel. And then they finally were just like, no, it's just Scream 2. We're just going to go.
Which is funny
2.
because for the efficacy of what the joke is and for what they were trying to do, Scream 2 is the easiest answer and also the best answer. Because that's it. If you understand the commentary of the fact that the movie's title is also supposed to be like a wink and a nod to like, these are just cheap, shitty things that we throw out there. Calling the next one Scream 2 and then only ever numbering them is fucking hilarious. That's so funny.
And, it's that cliche of horror sequels where it's, oh, this one made money, immediately greenlight the next one, get it out within a year. And that's what happened here. Like, they were in production 6 months after the release of Scream in December of 96.
That's why nobody ages.
Yeah. And this movie comes out under a year from the release of Scream.
Do you think it's like the Harry Potter thing where the Harry Potter kids constantly had to like do ridiculous things with it was like in between 3, 4, 5, and 6, they had to do drastic haircut changes so that it was like, oh no, time has passed, because they shot one, finished shooting one, started shooting the next one, because they're like, well, these children are going to age into their 20s by the time we're done. So we need to get it done so that they don't, it would be odd for 17-year-old Harry Potter to be 30.
Yeah.
So it's the same, it's the same thing. Do we know how far apart chronologically the movies, like the stories
of Scream and Scream 2?
Yeah.
Scream 2 takes place 2 years after Scream.
Okay, so that's believable.
Yes.
You start filming, the year after.
Yeah, because they move from high school to now being in college.
It's funny because they do that again in the kind of requel with 5 is the same concept. 5, they're in high school. 6, it's a time jump. Yeah, which I love. Because you don't have to follow the threads of every character's life so scrupulously. You can just be like, oh, this amount of time has passed. They've changed in these ways. The actor we trust enough to show that those changes have been visualized. So good. We don't have to, it's like the letter that you would send to all your family at Christmas back in a time where phones were hard. And you would send like, little Johnny has learned to do a cartwheel, and, Melinda has landed herself in a prime university, and you'd update everybody. You don't have to spend the time doing that. You can just go, oh, they're college now, and that's what their lives are.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, and I think it's interesting to watch these characters because we stick with the same cast, that all of the living cast of the first movie, and living not in the sense of the actual actors, but living from the character's point of view. If they survived the first film, they are now in this film.
Yeah.
But being able to then watch the progression of these people in their careers, in their schooling, in their what have you.
Every single one of them, it's not the thing of like every single one of them shot the first movie, and then in between the time of the first movie and the second movie, because this happens a lot, especially how franchise heavy movies are just in general now. Somebody will star in a movie and then shoot 6 other movies in between that, and then come back and they're more successful, which means that they're Rob McElhenney, who is the creator writer of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, talks about in an interview the fact that shows like Friends, which is why I think of it because of Courtney Cox, but they all get more beautiful throughout the time that they're making it because the actors get more money, they get more success, they star in other things, they have personal chefs and nutritionists, they lose weight, they gain glow, they become beautiful people. And he's like, well, that's not indicative of the real world. And it's funny because this one is, there is no time for any of those changes. But then when you think about the thing as a whole, because of the way it's being shot and because of the way like the actors that they used and their fame and what, you know, what limited Hollywood explosion they had, the series feels very real.
Yeah.
Nobody Robert Downey Jr. It's like the closest is Courtney Cox because Friends was the biggest thing in the world.
Right.
But like Courtney Cox's character is sort of like image obsessed. So like having Courtney Cox reappear later on, like every time she reappears, Gale Weathers always has some audacious hairstyle, wears ridiculous clothing. Eventually you start to see like, and it's not a negative commentary, but she did have plastic surgery done. And eventually you see that reflective in the character as well. I was like, well, that's totally believable. And the fact that, you know, Neve Campbell, Sidney Prescott looks basically the same, like that's believable.
Yeah, it is. And it works for each of their characters in its own way. And it's one of those horror franchises where it's different than others because you do follow a main cast for several films. It's not just like, okay, and now who is Freddy going to be terrorizing this, you know, this time?
Or an even worse example, it's like, you know, what unit of pre-programmed teenagers is Jason going to walk around after?
That's really the better example. I just referenced Friday the 13th a couple times, and I'm like, well, let's reference something else.
Yeah, Jason is such an obvious, because you can't, you know, and people have made this joke a million times, but it's true. You plug and play these characters' names because I couldn't. That will be so. I you know, obviously we're excited to talk about all of these franchises, but by the time we get to Friday, dude, it will be a more impressive mental exercise if I can get a couple of them right.
I'm gonna have notes for all of it, and we're gonna try our best at those names. What's funny is they again went with the Christmas or the December release for this one, I guess for the same reasoning and just to get it out within a year. And because of the huge, giant success that the first Scream had, the initial date that they were supposed to, or the date that Scream 2 landed on, its release date, was originally also going to be shared with 2 other blockbuster films. Tomorrow Never Dies, which is a 007 film, if I'm not mistaken, and a little film called Titanic.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And because of the fear of being outperformed by Scream 2, they both bumped their release date by like a week.
That is so crazy.
Yeah.
Because, you know, hearing that story in hindsight, it's like, because I didn't know that, so I didn't know how that story ends. So hearing that it's the opposite of what you expect, that's good. I like that. Go Scream. Fuck Titanic. Go Scream. No, I like Titanic also, but.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I think that film's amazing. That's not what we're here to talk about today.
I wish. You know how we have like the canned like dialogue from every one of the movies we discuss? We also have to now play the Titanic theme.
Yeah, of course. Ty, get on that.
That's good. That's a good audio joke. Now, as always, we have a producer with us. Ty, say hello.
Hey, guys.
Oh, snap. That was very energetic. That was more energetic than we are.
Yeah.
He's the host now.
I don't know where that came from. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Ty, have you seen Scream 2?
Nope.
Good. Okay. And that is the kind of engaging conversation that we love. And, you know, it's why we do this show.
Yeah. It's good to know he's taking it very seriously.
Yeah. So are there parts of this movie, because the movie feels like such a stepping off point It feels like it's such a natural from 1 to 2. There's a lot of franchises, and an example of that is like Halloween, because you do have a return. And the return of Michael Myers, the return to this story that we were previously telling, or you have different reboots or different directors or writers. But this one, because it's the same cast, because it's so close, because it's pre-thought of. I'm turning this in with an idea of the next one. So he knew the working pieces. So when you have all that together, it really does feel like when you take the disc out for 1 and put the disc in for 2, and you click play, that it is the next. It's the next day. It's the next natural progression in these people's lives. Like another good example to use Harry Potter is Harry Potter. You watch the second movie and it's like, oh, we have picked up everything from 1 and immediately poured it into 2. And I do like that. I think something that cements that even better is the seamlessness of it all is her picking up the phone. And it's the first time in the series that we get the prank caller. Right. That uses the talk box, the Ghostface voice. And it's that phone call, and it's like, oh shit, are we jumping in right now? Like, are we already? Because the whole thing is about, where is he going to pop out? When is he going to pop out? Who's safe? Who's not? The rules, etc. And that's what and this movie really does well. Having a fucking film class in the movie really does well to work that out a little bit more and make it more integral to the series. But it is her reaction to that phone call of just like, I do not care. Yeah. It's been 2 years, and you are not the first, nor will you be the last to make this dumb prank call. I have a funny way, a way of personal gratification to handle it when it happens. She's almost like it's in a foul swoop, being like, not only do I have a way to handle this, and I roll my eyes at it, so it's happened so many times, but because she has that down pat way of handling it, it's like you can see that she's also kind of overcoming trauma, which is another, that's another through line from the first movie to the next movie. Is the first movie is she has this trauma because she's lost a parent through a violent act, and then she overcomes that, not so emotionally, but more, through action. She absolutely murders the first two. Well, no, technically the TV killed Stu. Yeah. Violent TV killed Stu Macher.
Which is the theme of this movie. Before we get to that, actually, we have our opening scene, which is set up in a similar but different way as the opening scene in the first one, which is we have some big name actors cameoing in this little horror film who then get brutally murdered. Very soon, like within the first 12 minutes of the movie, just like last time. Yeah. And I think that the opening sequence is interesting because it's meta within itself. We're witnessing a couple played by Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps. They are going to the premiere or maybe a preview screening of Stab, which is the movie within a movie of the events of the Woodborough murders from the first film.
Based off a book written by Gail Weathers.
Correct. Yeah. So it's super meta. They go in, and it is a packed theater. And I noticed, especially on this viewing, it's like just the amount of little nods to... do you know who... William Castle is, if I say that name. William Castle was a filmmaker who, in like I want to say the 50s and the 60s, he came up with a lot of gimmicks whenever he would sell his films. Okay. And so you had things where like, he was he put out Vincent Price's House on Haunted Hill.
Okay.
And so at the end of that movie, spoilers for this movie, there's a spooky skeleton that pops out.
It's the scariest thing I've ever seen.
It really is.
Yeah.
And so what they would do, his gimmick in the theaters is that there would be, whenever that happens in the movie and the skeleton pops out, someone working in the theater would basically pull a curtain and then pull a rope and pulley system of a skeleton on a wire, and it would go over the audience.
And they would pass out.
They would lose their minds.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's real.
Things like that. Things like that's when 3D kind of became its first thing. He had another movie called The Tingler, I think also starring Vincent Price. And they would put these like buzzers under like certain seats in the audience. And at one point in the movie, Vincent Price like turns to the screen and he's like, the tingler is loose in the theater. Now scream for your lives. And then all of a sudden the buzzers would start going off. And so people would like feel it under their seats and they would lose their minds.
It's the thing of nowadays, things like, like Hollywood Studios, the Disney park has like Muppet Vision where those tricks are, those tricks exist. From childhood, most people know about those things. But like, in the 60s.
This was it being like invented.
If Vincent Price turned to the screen and spoke to me and said, the tingler is loose, scream for your life, and then my butt started to vibrate, I'd pass out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild stuff, man.
It's like, you ever see those videos of the guys that go up in the slingshot and they immediately pass out?
Yeah.
That would be me, but because of my butt vibration. I'd pass immediately out. Everybody in the theater would be like, the tingler got him. They'd be like, no, I swear I'm fine. I'm fine.
So in Scream 2, whenever they go into the theater, there's basically Scream versions of all of those things.
Which is brilliant, by the way, because making the movie in the movie is a great storytelling component. It brings the conversation of what happened in the first movie into the second movie without relying on trauma. You don't rely on the characters not being able to get past it. They can grow and change and move past trauma while still having the narrative thread of the first movie be involved. Super brilliant. The other reason it's brilliant is because now you have a hands-free way of ensuring that the ghost-faced mask within the universe of the movie is available, famous, and everybody who uses it goes after Sidney Prescott.
Yeah.
You tie the iconic imagery to the main character in a way that she nor anyone has the agency to control. So it doesn't take any freedom or agency or strength away from your character, but at the same time it guarantees like if a crazy person is going to put on a mask and murder people in this world, they are putting on the ghost face mask and they are trying to murder Sydney because now you have an infinite recyclable energy of copycat killers.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant.
Yeah. Because it's as they walk into the theater, everyone is handed a ghost face costume.
So it's now the main antagonist of the first movie that we have just stepped away from is replicated a dozen or more times in the first shots of the movie.
Yeah.
So now once again, it refreshes, well, who is it?
Who is it? Which again, that's what this franchise is.
Yeah.
It is ultimately a whodunit, and it makes it interesting for your first watch, and it makes it more interesting on rewatches because then you start catching all the little subtleties.
And that's the best part about it is it's a whodunit, but nobody at any point is pretending that it's not. You don't have the red herring issue. You have red herrings, and you have a red herring in the first Scream movie and in this Scream movie that are very good. You make decisions, and you're like, oh, well, it's clearly him.
Yeah.
And I watched through all of these in a night, and I guessed the Ghostface killer after because we went and saw certain of them in theaters. I didn't know the first time it was a whodunit. The second time, what's funny is that watching the sequel to the fifth movie that we saw together, the sixth movie, is when I started watching this franchise. I didn't realize that the second one would be a whodunit. I thought the whodunit was the gimmick of the fifth one, but the sixth one, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that was a pattern with these. And then watching first, it's like, okay, this is what these movies are.
Right.
So then watching the second, nothing but guesses.
Yeah, then you start,
Yeah.
Which is kind of a negative of watching them so close together once you know that. Because you watch the first one, you're like, oh, okay, so it's a whodunit. There's a possibility that it's multiple killers. It's not just one. And so then you're really trying to figure it out the whole time through the sequel. Whether or not that worked for you or not,
Yeah, it did. It did. And the funny part about that is that because of this movie theater scene and the insanity of it and everybody being so happy about it, the other thing that opening scene does is it makes me feel like a terrible person. Because I'm watching, and it is the thing of you're watching this movie and you settle down. And I remember being like, all right, rub my hands together, Scream 2, here we go. And I sit down and I'm watching it, and it's this movie theater scene. And then, minor detail of housekeeping. We've said this before. If the movie title is the title of this episode. We are going to spoil the shit out of it. And you can also, to an extent, expect spoilers from other Scream movies. It's like, that's the franchise, so we have to talk about it. But I think that's the last. Let's make a guarantee with each other that that's the last time we do a spoiler housekeeping. From now on, again, I mentioned this an episode or two ago. Again, if you have not heard all of our stuff, this is punishment for you.
Yeah.
You're being punished.
No, we probably still will. But
No, we probably will. And we will, because spoiler alert is such a ubiquitous thing.
Yeah.
But so specifically for this movie, in the intro with the movie theater, we watch this person who we do not know from any of the previous movies. Yep. We watch this person and this person's partner, both of them, get just horribly murdered.
Yeah. But it's not in the privacy of Casey Becker's home.
No.
It is in a public theater filled with just rowdy fans of a movie that hasn't happened. They're excited about a movie that's based on murders that happen in their town.
Yeah.
Or in a town nearby.
Well, and that's the first movie explores this, with like the kids in the high school and the principal. And we talked about that last episode about how it's so bloodthirsty. The principal's like, fuck, they fucking hanged him in the football field.
Oh, well, let's go see.
Yeah, and everyone's like, they can't speed out of that house fast enough to go look at a dead body of a man that they know. So I think that there's just part of the commentary that Woodsboro and what Wes, I think, sees the world as, and the writer together, what they see the world as, is a violent, celebratory place of death and carnage. And that's why these movies work.
Well, and it's also, I think, asking the question, it's pointing the finger at us, the horror fan, of like, why do we enjoy these bloody, violent movies?
Yeah.
And if the violence was happening right in front of us, would we even notice or care, or would we just think it was part of the fun?
Which is so, and that is so effort. He didn't say it at all.
No.
It's just this silent moment of a finger point where the audience of that film at the premiere watches, because moments ago, Omar Epps is stabbed through the fucking face through a door. That's one of the more brutal deaths in the franchise, because it is like, you have to imagine that it catches part of his brain. If not, it's like his because I think about like those images, like the 3D, like MRI depth scans of the human body when you see these things, and it's like that probably cut the nerves of his eye and like into his skull. That's the temple area. Like, I can't imagine dying that way. It's fucking terrible.
No, it's horrible.
And we think, watching it, oh, that was fucking rad. They got him through a door. That's fucking awesome. And then he's bleeding out and he dies. But then she dies in like this, I don't mean to be sacrosanct so early on in this podcast, but it's kind of Jesus-y.
Yeah.
Because it's like she dies and is like kind of trying to survive and walk away from it, and is like shunted. And it's almost like she marches to the front to die on stage.
Yes.
Where the crowd is cheering.
Because they think it's part of
Like
all
the
these
skeleton,
William Castle gimmicks that they do.
And then slowly everyone in the audience realizing it's not fake, and they take their masks off. And that's the visual.
Yeah.
Is as they take the mask of this murderer, of somebody in their town who killed somebody, they take the mask off. And it's a terrified vision. They're horrified.
Yeah, this is fun whenever it's a movie. It's not fun whenever it's real.
And I think that this opening sequence goes, but is it ever fun? Even if it's in a movie. Why is it different? And that's the theme of the whole thing.
Truly is.
Especially because, and we've talked about this before, but especially because so far as the Scream franchise goes, as you open the second movie with Jada and Omar's characters, these two people that we have not seen before, they are also the first people of color.
That is true.
In this horror franchise.
Yeah.
Because you and I have talked about this nebulously in the first movie, in the Mocker house party.
In the school, probably in the background.
Not enough that you remember, and that's the point.
Yeah, not a named character.
Right.
Not any
A friend
of the
of
main
a friend.
cast, not a friend of a friend. No people of color in that first movie.
And what's funny is that feels like a commentary. I don't know if that was intentional. I'm not going to speak for that. I'm not in a place to be able to speak for it. But if that's the commentary, great. That makes sense. If it's not the commentary, it's even more ubiquitous of what that issue was. Then you move to the second movie, and it's
you start with these two characters.
And like the fucking stereotype is, they are also the first people to die.
Yes.
And it's like that's a through line through these movies, and specifically, you know, we talk about Scary Movie, but Scary Movie makes fun of that a lot as well. That's a cliche. It's the last girl at the end lives, and you know that's the final girl, and I've heard it a lot, and I'm sure it's kind of difficult, you know, for people outside of, you know, specifically in that community. It's like, well, yeah, they're the first people to die, and is that sarcastic? Is this pointing a light on that?
Yeah. And I don't know if maybe there was an outcry from people after the first movie to, you know, Miramax or to Wes of just like, hey, why were we not represented?
It's Lando Calrissian in Empire.
Right.
It's, hey, this movie's really popular, but how did you seriously not have any people of color in this movie?
Right.
And it's like, well, yeah, I don't know.
But then in perfect Scream fashion, like you said, they both subvert the expectation by bringing them into the next one to fix the problem, but then they reiterate the cliche of the you know, the black guy dies first in the horror movie.
Right. And then you meet the cast, and one of Sydney's closest people in this film.
Right, her roommate, her best friend at this point.
Is not only another woman lead, which is great, and a smart one with agency, but it's also then a person of color, which is nice. And so I'm going to choose to believe that, personally, I think that they probably knew what they were doing with that commentary, because it's so on the nose, and then immediately to just be like, oh, and also don't worry, we are being diverse. We have become inclusive as well, and we're going to do both.
Yeah,
and it's like that's not bad. And I think that's probably on purpose.
And producer Ty, do you want any, not to put you on the spot, do you want any sort of input in this? Because I know you haven't really seen the movie. I think you've seen parts of it here and there.
Yeah, you had me watch the beginning, like that opening sequence. And I mean, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't speak to that. But I have a decent background just in film history and just like the craft. And so I like that it's acknowledged. It's a cool concept and cool, I guess, reality of the genre to acknowledge. And I do think it's very on the nose, and I lean more towards PJ or not to say that you disagree, but
no,
I lean, I agree with you in the sense that I think that was, it had to be intentional. I mean, I didn't see it obviously, but assuming that it happened the way that you did, because
it's funny to try and share like a thing without having seen the full context.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna take your word for it. But yeah, assuming it did happen that way, you know, I would assume that's on the nose, because if not, it's a really weird way to be self-aware and then completely throw all of that down the toilet. So.
Yeah. Well, It's funny because like Jada's character even is like yelling at the screen, like, you idiot, turn around. It's a thing that we all do. And it's funny because she's even like, yeah, no, we typically don't do well in these situations. So like, you would know how to survive it. This idiot nobody acts like that.
Her dialogue is very much that of just explaining, you know, the plight is probably the wrong term, but of people of color in.
It reminded me of, it almost feels like a black person explaining to their white friend why a black person might say, oh, black people always die in horror movies. Because I personally have had a lot of experiences where people that I know have kind of, not necessarily bristled, but kind of brushed it off like, oh, that's not necessarily true. Like, why are you saying that? As though it's not historically the case. Like, just if you look across the history of horror films, that's just factually what happens. And so I think that conversation kind of felt like that explanation, like explaining to non-black people, I guess, the thing that might have never even considered. And then just kind of that conversation almost serves to get their gears turning. Because once it's brought up, then you can't unsee it.
Well, and what's funny about that specifically is that it is obviously such a cliche that in these movies, and it's usually like the black man in the major cast is the one who usually dies first. It's the joke. They make it in Cabin in the Woods. They make it in a bunch of movies. But then in this movie, the only person of color in the movie to survive is, and you know, this is later in the story, but it's Gail's cameraman.
Yes.
Who is already like, well, hold on, no, people are getting murdered. Like, I'm a journalist. Like, I'm a camera person. I operate this camera, and people are getting murdered. And then eventually it continues to happen nebulously around this character. And he's like, fuck this, I'm leaving. We don't do good in these scenarios. You understand? Like, I can't be here. I have to go. And he leaves.
Yeah. And from the best of my knowledge, that actually that was the character. So Dwayne Martin is the actor playing Joel. And that was apparently his input. That was not how it was written. That's not how it was supposed to go. I don't know if he was supposed to die or not, but at some point he just talked to Wes and was just like, Wes, none of this makes sense for my character. If I was in this situation and this was happening, I would leave. I would do everything that I can to remove myself from the situation. Yeah. And Wes was like, I love it. Okay, let's go with that. And they literally, the scene, Ty, just to explain, it is him explaining to Courtney Cox's character, Gail. He's dropping off all of his equipment because he's been her cameraman for the beginning of this movie. He drops off all the stuff that he shot and he's like, here's all the footage. I can't do this anymore. I am leaving. And in the background, there's just a taxi cab and he walks down there, gets in and drives away.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't seen these, but from what I know, Scream is basically the meta franchise. That sounds like a pretty meta. That sounds, I feel like because that's exactly what the conversation is amongst quote unquote like the black community. It's like, oh, that's not what would happen. Like to Jada Pinkett's commentary in the beginning of the movie when she's yelling at the screen, because that's stereotypically like what black people do and because that's why black people don't do well in horror movies, because like they wouldn't do that. Like they would always like they would do what Dwayne Martin's character did in that, like, oh, I'm out of here, because that's the joke. Everyone knows that joke. Like, oh, white people are going to go towards that sound and the black person's going to go running. Like,
white people open the door and black people close the door on their way out.
Yeah.
In a horror situation, that makes a lot of sense. And what I think is so funny about that is him going like, no, I'm going to leave. You can make the argument that like the reason that in the movie her love interest's name is also Derek, which is going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. But Derek and other characters surrounding stay around Sydney because it's like, well, no, we love you. We want to protect you. You're our friend. We care about what happens to you. And then this character is like, I am an employee. And I am only here because of money, and I don't give a fuck about any of you. I barely know Gail.
Right.
I'm not going to be killed because of this shit. And he fucking pieces out. And that is so funny. And that's when you see those little moments, I think that is why I like this movie among them. That's why I like it so much, is because it's Randy openly being like, yeah, sequels are bad. Mm-hmm. And it's Jada Pinkett Smith dying and people taking masks off and looking horrified at the reality in spite of being like, fuck yeah, murder, like 10 seconds ago. And then this dude being like, no, fuck off. It's people acting real in this movie in the face of things that they would normally do. And then that mask gets pulled up for a second and it's like, hey, we know it's a movie. It's like, that's so good. They start doing it in the first, and by this movie, he's already perfected it.
Yeah, they have perfected it completely.
It's great. So after this opening of this insane movie, we cut, to the insane life of this person who is the now main character of this insane movie that apparently everyone, it's like the real world Snap is the equivalence of Avengers Endgame or whatever. The movie hasn't come out yet, but people are losing their fucking minds.
Yeah. Big fans.
Yeah, which is so funny. Everything about it is so funny, but you have this this character who has gone through literal hell. Mm-hmm. You find out that this character's mother in the first movie was horribly abused, murdered, all of this shit. And then, you still have this guy that was falsely accused by her, Liev Schreiber's character, Cotton Weary.
Okay. Yeah. Which he has a very quick, there's a quick shot of him on TV doing an interview at the very beginning of the movie. I think it's right after the Sydney call and the prank phone call, and she's getting ready. And Kevin Williamson is the interviewer for a second. So the writer of the film is interviewing Cotton Weary.
That's funny. So. And it's so funny because, again, she gets this phone call. Fuck you. Hangs it up. Makes him, embarrasses him. It's hilarious. And then it's just like, oh, I expected this person to be like, more akin to like, in like Halloween 2018, Laurie Strode is like, block the doors, constantly packing heat, like eyeball twitching, looking over her shoulder, like somebody who's like not survived, but is surviving this thing that's happened. And Sydney is so resilient because she's a kid, she's super young, but it's also like, she's just really this, I have to move forward, strong, person.
And I think it's a little bit of, this is a horrible thing that happened, but I tackled that. I took charge. I ended the killers last time. And it's the only time that this has happened. This is the insane thing that happened, but I'm moving on with my life. Which is I've taken charge and I'm moving on.
And it's so powerful and impactful to say those things. And it also makes because a lot of these characters at this point, either you follow them along and they're confident the entire time, and it's Ripley. Well, Ripley has, fears and faults, but she stays present in mind and focused and committed the entire time. Yeah. And then you have Sydney, who is confident and is like, no, I killed them. I killed Stu. I killed Billy. Nothing's coming after me. These guys are fakes. They're just pranking me. I don't have to give them any attention until the second it's real again.
Yes.
And the news breaks that those people in that movie theater got murdered by a man in a ghost face mask. And it's, well, that's a little close to home. And then the killings start. And it is all of that bravado, all of that confidence melts off. And it's like, oh shit, no, this is happening again.
Yes. And then, so the story itself then brings our characters together of, Sydney showing back up. She's on campus, she's dealing with her thing. People the news immediately starts like, do you have anything to do with this? Do you know the victims? Do you know?
And because of the news, Gale shows back up.
Yes.
And we get the second Gale Weathers slap.
That is true.
Which is a wonderful testament to how cool of a person Courtney Cox seems. Because it's just like, yeah, no, I like that this is a thing. Hit me again. Like, that's fucking hilarious. Yeah.
And I think because she had such a good girl image from Friends, which is, her big, that's going on right now. It's the biggest thing on the planet.
Yeah.
And that's the reason she partially took the Gale cast in the first film is like, no, I want to have this role and I want to play it like this. I want to be a bitch.
I am not kind. I am not reciprocal. I am not easy to deal with. I am bullheaded and very strong-willed. And Gale, obviously Gale's successful. And at this point, she's so successful. But the character's not played like arrogant. It's not like, yeah, well, I'm the right. Like, she still has humility. It's played like, well, now I am the one who calls shots. So like before I would call shots that maybe I shouldn't be calling. Now there's all of that red tape is gone.
Yeah. If I've experienced this before, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm gonna cut through some red tape because I need to solve this thing.
And also, I am an author of a best-selling book about journalism I performed that has led to the biggest phenomenon in the world that is now leading to people getting killed again. And I'm responsible for it all. And you see guilt. You see, Courtney Cox is great.
Yeah, she really
as
is.
Gale in every one of these. But in this one, I think this is my favorite Gale movie because this is the Gale movie, and it's often said that by people watching them perform, because we eventually meet Dewey as well, and we'll get to him in just one second. But it's like this is the movie where the two of them fall in love in real life. Courtney Cox and David Arquette. They were married for a brief stint.
Yeah. They meet during Scream. They begin like kind of dating with Scream 2 because obviously that was 6 months later they're shooting this thing, and then they get married like a couple months before they start shooting Scream 3.
Yeah, and that's adorable.
And then they're married until like 2013.
Yeah,
they were married a lot longer than I thought.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I think the way it's all of those quasi-celebrity marriages are always a brief so you just assume it would be quick, but you've got this amazing change with that character because she has these negative traits in the beginning that make her lovably almost like mischievous. Like she's going to get the story. And then by the end of it, she's a survivor. And it's kind of hinted at that she's a better person than she first came off as.
Right.
The second movie really hammers that home. And by the end of it, it's like, oh no, I love this person. She is kind, she is considerate, she is self-effacing and apologetic.
Well, and the biggest difference is that her relationship with, in the first movie, she's flirty with Dewey because she's trying to get things out of him. Oh, well, if I befriend this buffoon of a cop, he can get me into the house where these things are happening.
He raises the caution tape and lets me in the crime scene.
So
I'm not
this
supposed to be there.
time, it's, hey, I'm sorry that I took advantage of you last time. But nothing was going to work out between us. That wasn't a real thing, to actually developing feelings for each other.
Right.
Because by the end of this movie, instead of her, Gail, okay, let's go. The Woodsboro murders just as a news reporter.
Right.
She instead gets in the ambulance with Dewey and they drive away together.
Yeah. And that's so refreshing because it's such a nice character growth moment from the B plot. Mm-hmm. And obviously Sydney grows and Sydney changes and she is pushed to her limits again and she overcomes the sexiest Ghostface killer ever, Timmy the Elephant.
Oh, I was about to say Laurie Metcalf?
No, she's great.
Aunt Jackie?
No, Loomis is great.
I get it.
Mrs.
Though.
Loomis is great.
Yeah.
The late Mrs. Loomis is great. But no, Timmy the Elephant is a prime slab of All-American. I think he's from Tennessee, but I was going to say Tennessee beef.
Yeah, I get what
somewhere where he has enough of a drawl.
Yeah.
Somewhere with a drawl beef is the name of what his butt is. Oh, God. No, he's a beautiful man. But yeah, no, I absolutely love Gail's character in this movie so much. And she's my favorite part of this movie. And then Dewey.
Dewey is amazing.
Dewey is the second best part of every movie he's in.
See, let's talk about Dewey. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So Dewey comes back on the scene because his friend, presumably like lifelong or childhood or at least high school, aged friend, Sydney, who Dewey's younger sister Tatum was best friends with.
Who is now dead.
Right. And so he is almost like the protective big brother then of Sydney, and he feels responsible. And so he comes into town to the college to try and take care of her again.
Where we learn he has permanent nerve damage.
Yes.
Like
he walks with a limp.
His hand is like tucked up into his body. He can't open it all the way.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I suffered permanent nerve damage, but I'm back. Let's go, motherfuckers. Yeah. And it's just like, it's so great.
Yeah. I love like what Dewey represents because he's less bumbling this time.
His speech. Have you ever considered maybe the fact that I act bumbling so that I can get an advantage, like an edge on my opponent? And he has that speech and it's like, is that the case, Dewey?
Right.
And then it like both is and isn't.
Yes.
Because he's so much more like confident and he's still just a moron.
Right.
And it's amazing. It's beautiful.
And he plays it so well. Like that performance is amazing.
It's like if Chris Evans played Captain America as both powerful, like as powerful as he did, but also like Captain America is on like a 6th grade reading level. Like he's not sharp, which is probably true because Captain America came from a time where you had to buy college credits with cigarettes. So who knows?
That's true.
Every single time we talk about Dewey, I can't talk about it without because even his best moments, like when he's talking to Randy and we'll get to Randy.
Yeah.
We'll get to everybody. Yeah. That's why I love this movie because it's everyone's back and everyone's great.
And you have an entire new cast of characters who are all like the young, hot actors in Hollywood at that moment.
Yeah.
And it's...
Oh my God, Sarah Michelle Gellar is in this.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And she's right in the middle of her Buffy fame.
Yeah.
Like, that is happening at the same time that this is happening.
She's in it for 10 minutes, and it ends with her being thrown from the balcony. And that's why these movies are so fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Is because the most famous people in your movies are the people in the beginning who immediately get murdered.
And especially if you haven't watched them, like rewatch them in a while, because then you start and you're just like, Sarah Michelle Gellar, she's in this, but wasn't she also in I Know What You Did Last Summer? Like, which is basically a ripoff of the Scream franchise. Like, it's too meta. I don't know what's happening anymore.
She's in the ripoff of The Thing that is ripping off The Things. How did this happen in real life? How did the calculus of reality end up with something that is so baffling? Which is the fact that within this movie, you've got all of these different performances from people who would go on to do amazing things.
Yeah.
Then you've got like Jamie Kennedy, David Arquette. They had experience, they had fame, but it wasn't like Courtney Cox. Courtney Cox shot to the top of everything. I mean, she's a household name. And it's funny because, again, Courtney Cox experiences all this fame, but then the integrity of the writing of these movies is like, yeah, but she's not my main character. It's like in the first movie, people knew who Courtney Cox was. Neve Campbell is cast as this. Well, no, this is the person that fits the role of the original of the protagonist. This is my protagonist,
Right.
And Courtney Cox launches, and then it's like, yeah, but she'll always be Gale Weathers' side character, never, Sidney Prescott main character, which is nice.
In later films, she takes a little bit more center stage, but that's almost just the story causes it to happen that way.
Yeah.
Because Neve Campbell is not available as much or is not in the movie. And so it's like, okay, well, now Gale gets a little bit more screen time.
Yeah.
But it's a natural progression. It doesn't feel shoehorned in of just like, well, we got to put our big star up there first.
Yeah. And what's funny is that this kind of follows the same pattern, right? You have of Scream 1 in storytelling, because you have the A plot, which is Sydney, her friend, escaping, trying to get, into safety, figuring out who the Ghostface killer is. Is it her boyfriend, Derek? Is it, all of these people? Is it Cotton? Because Cotton makes his reemergence in an incredible, I think, combination of acting and direction.
Yeah.
Because Liev Schreiber is a great actor,
Amazing.
and he acts terrifying in this movie. It is like his performance is more real and more fearful than it causes more fear than the Ghostface killers, because people like Cotton by this point in the movie who are like fame obsessed and do anything to bite that apple one more time. And his fame in his life is that he was wrongly convicted. So it's like, well, the next step is, because I've told my story enough. No one wants to hear my story. Everyone knows it. The movie's out now. It's ubiquitous. No one needs to hear it again. So how do I continue to stay relevant?
Yep.
I need the person who falsely convicted me to come on TV with me.
Yeah, let's have a sit down. Let's have a conversation. But let's do it on camera and put it out there for everyone to see.
Right.
It's going to keep you relevant, and it's going to keep me relevant. And Sydney is the opposite of that, of like, I want this story to go away.
Right.
I was
like this
hoping
life.
that, like, with the movie coming out, like, that could be the end of it.
I think the most tragic part of his performance is that he has a bit of a point.
Yeah.
You've ruined my life. The only way that I can continue with my life, because now I can't get a regular job. I can't do any of this stuff. You falsely accused me of rape and murder and sent me to prison. I can't do anything now. So now that I need you to do this, you kind of owe me. And there can be a debate of the relevance and the is that a correct thing to think? You can debate that, but from his perspective, he has a point. But he goes about it in this just horrifically toxic way.
Yes.
He is putting his body presence over her. He is being domineering, controlling.
Like, he's already a physically larger person.
Right, who has threatened her before. And now he is physically threatening her in like a deserted area of this library. And then you see the Wes Craven trick of he's wearing the black boots.
Yes.
He's wearing the only part of the Ghostface killer that you can see that they can't shed off. So it's, well, is it Cotton? Which was my guess.
Could be Cotton.
He was the red herring in the first movie. My assumption is that he is the actual killer in the second movie.
The other person who is shown multiple times wearing the black boots, Gale's cameraman.
Seriously?
Yes,
That's
and
amazing.
So at the moment where Randy is killed, he has disappeared because they're on like the quad of this college out in this open grassy area, and they get a phone call. And just before that happens, the cameraman had left. Joel had left. And then they get the phone call, and then they're running around they're tackling people who are also on phones, trying to figure out, because Ghostface can see them. And then Randy gets murdered horribly. And then whenever they finally discover his body, that is when Joel walks back up.
That's crazy.
And he is wearing the black boots.
And also that tackle, because they're tackling
amazing.
people on the cell phone. David Arquette almost killed that guy.
Yeah.
Like he threw his whole body weight onto him.
When you watch it, like you see his Dewey's like knees like hit that
Yeah.
guy.
Oh, he crumples.
In like his shoulder blades.
Yeah, he hits the floor in a position that a human being shouldn't be able to hit. And it's really rough.
And they just kept going.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a sport.
And it's funny because you've got now two people in the boots, and that's one way. And it's the way that people act and he usually has a good way of making, at one point, the person that you think, is the killer is. Mm-hmm. And then you don't think that anymore. Now, this movie is interesting because it's like in Scream 1, at one point you think it's Stu, at one point you think it's Billy, and then at other points you think it's other people. And then when it's revealed that it's, at least Stu, it's like, oh, well, that's who it is. But then Billy hits you, and it's like, oh, okay. In this movie, I think it might be Derek because he's a creep. I think it's
really
Mickey.
Set him up as.
Yeah. But they do a decent job of making it seem like it might be Mickey also. He's a creep. He seems to glorify violence. It seems like for a minute, well, maybe it's him. And then it's not anymore. Now it's, Boots, cameraman. It's whomever.
It's the little things here and there that they kind of throw out that you're like, oh, okay. It could be anyone.
Yeah. And then it ends with, oh no, it is this guy that you thought it was for a while. It's the handsome young guy who glorifies violence. We did that bit again.
He's what does Randy refer to him as? The Tarantino fanboy.
Yeah.
And what's funny is like the way that like his clothes, like his outfits, his hair, and the way Timothy Olyphant speaks in this movie is, once you say the word Tarantino, I'm like, yeah, that's what he's doing. Like he's just doing, it sounds like that interview that Tarantino does that you and I both quote of just like, that's why it's so much fun, Jan.
Right.
Violence in movies is not the same as real violence, which is what this movie is about.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which cements it so, it cements the fact that does this have an effect on real life is how we open this character's appearance. And it's, no, this is my viewpoint. And then it doesn't matter what he says his viewpoint was because he was inspired by these serial killers and he is now murdering people. So it's like, well, no matter what you say, it's the movie does its service to prove that it's a yes. You flip-flop back and forth between is it or isn't it. But the real reason I love this version of the whodunit is because that happens in the first one as well. Is it this bad boy? Is it this idiot? Is it who is it? But you have suspicions. The second killer in this movie that we never suspect.
Right.
Because they don't tell you who it is. If you knew that she was, is it Nancy Loomis?
Yes.
Which is
ultimately it is.
And it's so funny because you don't know that that's who that is.
Right.
Fake name, fake job, fake title the entire time. She's like this, like she keeps cropping up at these murder scenes, but she's so bumbling and like
she's another reporter. She's like a local reporter. Mm-hmm. She goes by Debbie Salt, played by Laurie Metcalf, who was, just off. Like Roseanne had just ended, and this was, and so she plays Aunt Jackie on that for like, I think that show ran for 9 seasons, 7 or 9 seasons, something like that. Then does this. And again, it's kind of that thing of like, well, I've played this for so many years. I want to do something else.
Yeah.
And so she plays this kind of like shitty local news person who's like always on Gail's coattails, like trying to get the scoop. And it's like, no, we are not equals. We are not the same. And then it's the reveal.
Gail shutting her down is so damn funny. It's funny every time I watch it because it's big fish in little pond eating like little fish in even smaller pond.
Yeah.
There's no reason for her to be mean. There's no reason for her to be rude, but it's just Gail Weathers needs to be better, but she can't be with this annoying, like Midwestern, like, oh, I'm just trying to get the scoop. Gail's like, dude, get out of my fucking way. And it's so mean and it's so funny. It's so gratifying to watch.
But you would never suspect.
No.
And so whenever we get to the climax of this movie and the door opens to the side door of the theater and Courtney Cox comes in, Gail is like, it's not me.
Because that's another thing is that from the first movie, you're like, oh shit, is it Gail?
Yeah.
Like, oh God, is she one of them?
Has something happened? And so, Timothy Olyphant's character, Mickey, he reveals himself as the Ghostface Killer.
For the I think in the entire franchise, the weakest
probably
motivation.
Yeah.
I don't love his motivation.
Yeah.
It works cinematically, but like I don't know. That feels like the least likely reason somebody would like snap and start to murder people.
Right. And then he's like, well, just like last time, there's two of us. Door opens. Courtney, Gail comes in. Nope, it's not me. Who's on the other side of this gun leading me into the room?
Right.
But Debbie Salt.
Right.
And then Sydney makes the connection of Mrs. Loomis.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, as the audience would have no idea who that is.
Which is funny because the first movie, the reason that the whodunit works so well is because you are partially omniscient. You see everybody doing things in a reasonable place that you would be. Mm-hmm. And this one, it takes that away from you just a little bit more because it's like you see everybody doing everything, but you don't have all the pieces.
Right.
You know who Billy is, you know who Stu is, or at least who they're presenting as. You know who Randy presents as, because that's kind of a commentary is who it could be anyone. Everyone acts a certain way around everybody else. But you can't make an educated guess about Mrs. Loomis because she's lying from the jump.
Yes.
She's a fucking psychopath whose intention the entire time was to show up, find out where Sydney is, and then you realize, oh God, she's been asking where this girl is the entire time. Yes. She's been trying to find her the whole time, or like at least get information.
But then that's important because whenever she steps onto the stage, that is the first time in the film that those two characters have seen each other. Because otherwise, it would have given it up. If Sydney sees Debbie Salt before that, the Loomis connection is out of the bag.
Right. Oh yeah. Because imagine that'd be a strange one. Because you just have to take the shot in the middle of like the school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would be that.
But it's that Nancy Loomis is trying to get to Sydney to get revenge on what Sydney did to her son because of what her son did to Sydney's mother. It's this whole chain
it's the like, psychotic break.
Yes. But then she's also framing Mickey to go down as the killer.
Right.
Because he's just a psychopath and wants to do this.
Right. This is
because of the violence in the movies,
which she is then also. He's the cinema side, he's the stab side, she's the scream side.
Yeah,
he wants to, and they touch on this a handful of times throughout the series, but he wants to kill because of the fun. This is what it is,
and he hopes to make it through this and live and become infamous because of it.
Right. He wants to be the copycat killer. And then put his own spin. And then she wants to kill her because she is psychotic and thinks that, hey, my husband had sex with your mom. So my son found out and he raped and killed your mom with his friend. And then you killed my son. So now I got to kill you. And it's like, that's all bad. Don't get me wrong. That's all bad. However, your decision that you have to take revenge on this person that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And it is presented in such a way, and her performance is also so great.
Yeah.
All of these casts are so wonderful because her performance is like, no, this makes sense. Mm-hmm. There's not a shred of like, well, hold on. It's like, no, I am convicted. I am going to stand here. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen at gunpoint because this is the end and it's all justified. And then Mickey's like, I'm crazy. It's just so good. They're a good duo.
Yeah. And it plays into another kind of horror staple, which is like the mother-son revenge dynamic.
Yeah.
Because we've seen that in things like Psycho. We've seen it in Friday the 13th. That whole franchise is built on that.
This is just the most clean-cut example of like, yeah, parent-driven crazy.
Yeah.
But it is so crazy and so far gone that they almost like start laughing. They're like, what the fuck is happening? And I think that something I like about the kind of climax is that every time Sydney sees that mask come off, it breaks the fear immediately. It's like, oh, well, fuck you guys. Like, I know who you are. I don't have to be afraid of you. I don't have to take this shit from you. And then, she foibles these psychopaths and so it goes.
Talking about, both Mickey and Loomis, Nancy Loomis, as the killer is being revealed, there's plenty of red herrings. There's plenty of other characters who they set up. I mean, Derek being the main one. That every line that Jerry O'Connell gives could be taken
like a double meaning.
As yes, but they very early on. I think Randy talks about last time it was the boyfriend, and we immediately begin looking at him of just like, well, you're Sydney's boyfriend. Could you be the one? And so they do a really good job of setting him up and you never quite know. And then it's finally, you know, revealed it's like, well, it's not him. Okay, cool. I believe in the original script for this movie, he was supposed to be the killer. He was going to be one of the two. The other was going to be Sydney's roommate. They were going to be the killers.
Okay.
And then that script leaked online. Like
that's
very, very early.
I didn't know
on.
that stuff happened that early.
This is one of the first
history.
key examples of that, of the script leaked, including who the killers were, all the identity. And so they had to, like, Kevin Williamson had to, like, scrap most of it. They kept the basic structure. He's rewriting, like, on a daily basis sometimes, like handing in the script pages that morning for them to go over and then shoot that day.
Yeah.
Like, it is. And then by the end of it, like, they did not write the ending. No one got that until, like, the week they were shooting it. It was printed on, like, gray paper that cannot be photocopied. They were, at the end of shooting days, they were burning and shredding scripts so that nothing could get out a second time.
Which is probably how they still practice these things today.
Yeah, I would assume
Why
so.
doesn't Marvel do that? So many Marvel movies have been, you know.
You would think. What I find strange is, like, we do spend a lot of time, and I'm happy that we do, with our legacy cast, like the cast from the first movie. But I think that one of the falls that this movie has is that we don't then spend enough time with the new group. Like, we do an okay job of kind of like, here's Sydney's new group of friends, and any of them could be the killers. Is it her roommate Hallie? Is it Mickey? Is it her boyfriend Derek? Is it these two sorority sisters that she's like trying to, who are played by Portia de Rossi and Rebecca Gayheart?
Right.
Rebecca Gayheart, who would then, she tried out for stuff in Scream 1, didn't get those roles, tried out for roles in this, didn't get those. Finally was then they were like, oh, but you can play this.
Yeah, that's fun.
And then a couple years later, she's in another kind of ripoff of the Scream franchise in Urban Legend, which is another slasher movie.
Okay.
So yeah, anyway, they set up like a little bit of all these people, but I don't feel like we really get enough time to meet or get to know any of them.
Yeah,
I think they're all underdeveloped.
It's my reaction. Oh shit, that's right. Sarah Michelle Gellar is in this movie.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah. And unfortunately, I think they exist to either be very, you know, thin red herrings or to just get murdered.
Or to get killed.
Yeah.
Which is the slasher, like, that's the cliche.
Like, oh, we didn't know you in the last movie? Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're not making it through this one.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest, I guess my biggest, like, negative about this movie, especially my latest rewatch, is because I used to rate this very, very closely with Scream. Like, I think it sits very, very high. I still think think it's great. I think it holds up really well. My biggest problem with it, I think, is that where Scream was a satire of the slasher genre as a whole, this is more so a satire of what a Scream movie is.
Yeah.
It's almost too similar. And so and especially if they had ended up with the original script where the boyfriend was the killer again. It's just like, are you really just doing it again?
Yeah.
Which is the problem I have with, like, certain sequels. Like, you brought up Harry Potter before, and I think Harry Potter and Chamber of Secrets is one of the weakest entries in that as both a book and the movie, because it's just, let's do the first one again, and let's take out three-headed dog and put in big snake.
Yeah. Secret tunnel that's spooky, that's filled with traps and puzzles.
Oh, it's probably Snape. Oh, no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's plug and play. And I think it works fine in, we're establishing what this universe is, especially because that franchise, you know, the Harry Potter franchise goes on and it's building a bigger world. But with this, it's like, it's a little too cookie cutter. And they do some different things because of the script leak and having to rewrite things. But most of its references in this movie are not about the horror franchise.
They're about Billy and Stu.
They're about Scream. They're about the things that we've already seen
About
a year
Stab,
ago at this point, you know, in time. Or just kind of loosely about sequels, the idea of sequels.
Yeah, because in the first movie, Randy is he's an employee of a video store.
Right.
So you get actual film posters.
Yeah.
You live in this world. We said it in the last episode that the Scream universe exists within this world where everyone has an opinion on horror. Everyone loves it. And I hadn't thought of that, but you are right, because this one, I struggle to think of any mentions.
They mentioned the big ones are in the Randy is in a film studies course, and they're having a discussion, and they bring up, this is the clip that we played earlier. They bring up sequels, and Randy's like, sequels suck. And he's like, name any sequel that is, regarded as better than the first. And then they go around the table of just like, Aliens. T2 is better than Terminator.
You have a hard on for Cameron.
Yeah, there's a joke about House 2, the second story, which is a horror film that I have never seen the House franchise. I think there's 3 or 4 of them.
Isn't that's the franchise about the doctor with the cane and Hugh Laurie does an American accent? That's the House thing.
No.
Okay.
No, that's a different thing. I also haven't watched that.
Would you be shocked to know that I knew that was not what you were talking about? And I did all that
That was a bit?
Yeah, I was just goofing off, buddy.
We don't do any bits on this podcast.
No, we do.
We're very serious.
We have to establish that we have to do bits, because I'll quit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's my writer.
Yeah.
We have to do bits.
It's green M&Ms, and we have to do bits.
Yes. Which, that green M&M thing, by the way, that's a good bit. Good job, man.
Thanks. But it's that. We don't have as many name drops of movies or directors and things like. There's a couple here and there, but it's far more of like, we're just doing the things that were happening in Scream.
Yeah, because even those references of Aliens and T2 and whatnot, even those references, those are just references to the fact that horror franchises had sequels. It doesn't.
Right.
In the first movie, Randy is using Halloween to express what will happen within the story. It is, you are taking these things affect this world because the audience knows that this world is the same as this one. But yeah, that's a good point, because we don't get a lot of that. The only thing that we do get is the classic Randy rules.
Yes, which those are funny, because he gives he tries to give 3 of them.
Right.
There's a scene where Dewey and Randy are sitting in like a cafe somewhere, and they're having, a heart to heart.
And Dewey is always so like, yeah. What about everything that happens? But Randy is always like, he's like the exasperated grandpa. He's like tearing his hair out. Like, why the fuck won't you people listen to me? He's the funniest part of any of the scenes that he's in, because Jamie Kennedy decided to make it like, the first movie, it was more of like, well, guys, I know what I'm talking about. And this one, it's like, no, seriously, why the fuck is no one listening to me? I called everything.
Yeah, because it's not only that, it's I already have the knowledge because I watch horror movies all the time. But now I've also lived through one. So please listen to me.
Right.
I have experience with this.
Because now you can't roll your eyes at my experience.
Yes.
You can't roll your eyes and go, life's not a movie. Because he's like, no, I walked you through how life is a movie. And we, the audience, that's tongue-in-cheek. But for him, in the reality of that movie, he's like, this almost got me killed because none of you listened to me. And he's so, in this one, it's just so like, fucking, putting the badge back on. Like, here we fucking go again. And then again, no. Dewey's sitting there like, yeah. And he's like, what? Why aren't you getting this? And he's so frustrated.
Yeah, so they're like, whenever when Randy loses it, those are my favorite moments. Just something about Jamie Kennedy's performance in those moments are just so funny to me and so good, because I don't know, I live in that brain where I'm not like a big yeller. I don't think I yell or scream a lot.
I do.
But
you
like,
don't.
I will raise my voice in like a excited sort of way to like emphasize things. And that's how I feel Randy does.
Oh yeah,
and it's so funny to me.
Now, when you say you're a fan of Randy losing it, do you mean Randy losing his fucking life? That's the one.
Yeah,
because he is the troubadour. We mentioned this in the last movie. I think I used that exact phrase. Randy is, hey, by the way, I'm the script. I'm a character, but I'm the script. I'm the one who reminds you that you're in a movie because that's the point of the movie, and I'm the one who tells you how these movies operate. And then he dies.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? Where do you go?
And that is like one of the, the big main characters from the first movie we watched die, and it's like, oh, well, who is still safe then?
Right, because if the omniscient one dies, because his character kind of has that role.
If he knows the rules and it still didn't save him,
then
no one's safe.
Yeah, who the fuck can live? Yeah. And he also mentions, main characters might go, and it's like, then you see him go, and it's like, it's self-fulfilling, and it's, oh, was he the character that dialogue references, or will there then be more deaths? Will Gale or Dewey die? Because at that point, I assume in the audience that Sydney's safe, but it's like, at what I like Dewey, I like Gale, I don't want them to die.
Right.
I now like her roommate quite a bit. I don't want her to die. Sarah Michelle Gellar, I believe at that point, is already dead, and personally, I didn't like her very much.
Yeah, she serves her purpose. She gets tossed out a window. And then she goes on to make a bunch of money in the later seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So good for her.
Good. Let's have a round of applause for Sarah Michelle Gellar. I said let's have a round of applause, then immediately got her name wrong. I'm so sorry, Miss Gellar, Miss Michelle Gellar.
We're going to cut all of this from here till when we begin.
The whole thing is gone? Oh, God.
Something that's interesting about the Randy death is that apparently, because Wes had such a difficult time getting Scream through the MPAA to get a rating, he had to do it like 8 times. He kept having to cut stuff until finally the producers at Miramax were like, please just push this through. Please just give us a rating so we can get this movie out. Yeah. And it happens. It's the biggest movie on the planet for that year. It's also, Scream is one of the highest grossing films of 1997 because it was released in December and it just kept making money into the next year.
That's funny.
I think it's number 8 or something on the list of that year. I could be wrong on that number. But so he had to do that so many times with Scream. So for Scream 2, he decided that he was going to try and trick the MPAA. And so he kept in a bunch of more violent stuff, in the opening scene where Omar, his character, gets stabbed through the ear, through the little wall, the divider wall. He used the same footage, but 3 times. So it looks like he's getting stabbed 3 times instead of just the one. But he had no intention of leaving all that in. And same thing with the Randy death. Randy apparently gets his throat slashed or whatever. And in the original, the cut that he gave the MPAA originally, you see it. It's horrible. No intention of keeping it in, because what he was hoping is they would go, oh, well, you have to cut this, and this. And he'd be like, oh, okay, I'll cut it, and get all the things he actually wanted in.
That's great.
Which is a trick that Hitchcock pulled in Psycho. In the 50s, that movie was...
I'll pitch the worst.
Yes.
Knowing that my creative vision isn't compromised if I take it back to where I wanted it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is a shame, because I would love to have seen Randy die horribly and graphically on screen.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding. I love that character. Yeah. And that's the thing about this movie.
One of the biggest, I think I said this in the first in Scream episode, one of the biggest gripes I hear from fans is, why have we never seen Stu come back? And then the biggest one, honestly, is, why did you kill Randy in Scream 2?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, is that a lot of these franchises, the characters don't stick around. And if they do, and they're movie by movie by movie, it's like, well, I don't really care for this one. Or, this one's good. I don't, these are the characters I do like. These are the characters I don't like. I can't name a character in this or the last movie that I don't like.
Yeah.
That doesn't fill the screen.
Yeah,
it's great.
Difficult to do.
Pour one out for Randy, dude. We're a long time too late. But
that's true.
Pour one out for Randy. Jamie Kennedy, you are great at being the voice of meta things in a very specific film franchise. I don't know that there's an Oscar for that.
Probably not.
I'm going to make one. I'm going to send it to the Academy. The Third Channel has a lot of clout now because we're exactly 3 episodes deep. No, because the first episode is 0. So we're technically 2 episodes deep. Good for us. Thanks for tuning into the Third Channel podcast. Please, if you have the time, rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast apps.
You can follow us on social media at Third Channel Podcast, and you can find me online at ThatDRosenberg.
You can also reach out to us at thirdchannelpodcast@gmail.com, where we check every message we swear. Third Channel is hosted by PJ Minette
and Derek Rosenberg. Theme song and audio engineering by Fly Guy Ty.
The logo designed by Belle DeVelco.
Episode artwork by Nathan Walkington.
Keep it tuned right here to the third channel for all things horror. And remember,
Don't touch that dial.